Tov. This is the Daf Yomi for Sunday, February 16th, 2025. We're at Sanhedrin 61. So, backing up to the end of 60, it says, as it was stated with regard to one who slaughters an animal in order to sprinkle its blood in idol worship or to burn its fat in idol worship, Rabbi Yochanan says, and now we're in 61, deriving benefit from the animal is prohibited, as it is considered an offering of idol worship. Even if its blood was not ultimately sprinkled for idol worship, it is forbidden fat, burned for that purpose. And Reish Lakish says, deriving benefit from the animal is permitted. So, Rav Bar Rav Hanan concludes his analysis. According to Rabbi Yochanan, who derives this halacha from another source, this statement in the Baraita works out well. The verse that mentions the slaughter of an animal in idol worship apparently teaches a principle, as it is superfluous with regard to the halacha of slaughter itself, as stated in the Baraita. But according to Reish Lakish, who does not derive from any verse that one can have intention from one rite to another rite, one needs this verse to derive precisely this halacha, that one can have intention from one rite to another rite. Consequently, the verse is not superfluous and cannot be assumed that it teaches a principle with regard to the forms of idol worship that are punishable by death. Rav Papa objects to this. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, one does not need a verse to teach the halacha in a case of intention from one rite to another rite. Rabbi Yochanan initially only prohibits deriving benefit from the animal, but if not for this verse, the man who slaughtered the animal would not be liable to receive the death penalty. And therefore the verse comes to render the man liable to receive the death penalty. Therefore this verse is not superfluous according to Rabbi Yochanan either. Rav Acha, son of Rav Ika, objects to Rav Bar Rav Hanan's challenge to the derivation in the Baraita. And even according to Reish Lakish, does one need a verse to teach that one who slaughtered the animal is liable? Reish Lakish only permits one to derive benefit from the animal, but the man is certainly liable to receive the death penalty. This is just as the halacha is in the case of one who bows to a mountain, as deriving benefit from the mountain is permitted, but nevertheless, one who worshipped it is liable to be executed by the sword. Therefore, the verse that states the one who slaughters an offering in idol worship is liable to be executed is superfluous with regard to the issue of intention from one rite to another rite. Rav Acha of Difti said to Ravina, according to what Rava Bar Rav Hanan said to Abaye, that there is room to say that bowing was singled out in the verse to teach with regard to the entire category that any honorable form of worship carries the death penalty, there is a difficulty. With regard to the verse, take heed to yourself that you not be ensnared to follow them, saying, how do these nations serve their gods? So I will do likewise, Deuteronomy 12:30, which indicates that one is liable for worship an idol in the manner that the Gentiles worshipped it. This is stated to exclude what? Question mark, right? And if you would say that this verse is stated to exclude one who defecates before an idol that is worshipped by sacrificing offerings, it is not necessary to derive this halacha from this verse, as it is derived from the halacha of bowing to an idol, as follows. Just as bowing is an honorable form of worship and is punishable by death, so too an honorable form of worship is punishable by death when performed as idol worship, which excludes an offensive act such as defecating. Therefore, the halacha that one is not liable for defecating before an idol can be derived from bowing. Rather, this verse is stated to exclude one who defecates before the idol called Mercury, which is not its typical manner of worship. It might enter your mind to say that since the standard manner of worship of Mercury, namely throwing stones at it, is in any event an act of degradation, so too one who performs any act of degradation as worship of Mercury should be liable. Therefore, the verse teaches us that one is liable only for worshiping Mercury in its standard manner of worship. The Gemara raises an objection, but Rava Bar Rav Hanan's interpretation of the verse appears to contradict that which Rabbi Eliezer says. From where is it derived that one who sacrifices an animal to Mercury is liable? As it is stated, and they shall no longer sacrifice their sacrifices to the satyrs, Leviticus 17, verse 7. Rabbi Eliezer explains, if the verse is not needed for the matter of one who worships an idol in its typical manner, that is, one who sacrifices an idol as an offering to an idol that is worshipped by sacrificing offerings, as the halacha is in this case, is already written in the aforementioned verse. Quote, how do these nations serve their gods? So I will do likewise. End of quote. Applying it to the matter of one who worships an idol not in its typical manner, by sacrificing an offering to an idol that is not typically worshipped by sacrificing offerings. Therefore, one who sacrifices an offering to Mercury is liable, even though that is not its typical form of worship. According to Rava bar Rav Hanan, by contrast, it is derived that one is liable for worshiping an idol in any honorable manner, even not its typical manner of worship, from the halacha of bowing. So the Gemara answers, there, in the verse mentioned by Rabbi Eliezer, the reference is to one who sacrifices an offering to Mercury not as a form of worship, but rather in order to express insolence toward the Torah prohibition against sacrificing an offering to an idol. It is derived from the verse that this too is a transgression of prohibition and renders one liable for the death penalty. The Gemara relates, Rav Hamnuna lost his oxen and went to search for them. Rabbah met him and raised a contradiction between two Mishnayot. We learned in the Mishnah the one who worships idols is liable. By inference, one who worships idols, yes, he is liable. But one who merely says that he will worship idols is not liable. But didn't we learn in another Mishnah, so Sanhedrin 67a, one who says, I will worship an idol, or I will go and worship an idol, or let us go and worship an idol, is liable just as one who actually worships an idol. Evidently, one is liable for merely stating his intention to engage in idol worship. Rav Hamnuna said to him, the Mishnah here is referring to one who states, I intend to accept this idol upon myself as a god only through worship. Consequently, he's liable only when he actually worships it. One who intends to accept the idol as a god immediately is liable even before he actually worships it. Rav Yosef said, this answer is unnecessary. Have you removed the Tanaim from the world? So the Tanaim are the guys in the Mishnah, the sages in the Mishnah. It is a dispute between Tanaim, as it is taught in a Baraita, in the case of one who says, I am a god, come and worship me. Rabbi Meir deems him liable for incitement to idol worship, and Rabbi Yehuda deems him exempt. The Gemara explains, in a case where those to whom the inciter spoke subsequently worshipped him, everyone agrees that the inciter is liable, as it is written, you shall not make yourself a graven image, Exodus 20, verse 4, which is interpreted to include a case where one establishes himself as a god. When they disagree, is in a case where the incident ended in mere speech. Rabbi Meir holds that speech is significant matter, and therefore the inciter is liable for incitement, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that speech is nothing. Therefore, the contradiction between the Mishnayot can be resolved by attributing each Mishnah to a different Tana. Rav Yosef then said after considering the matter, what I said is not correct, as even according to Rabbi Yehuda, one is deemed liable for speech as well. As we learned in a Baraita that Rabbi Yehuda says, actually one is not liable unless he says, I will worship, or I will go and worship, or let us go and worship. Evidently, Rabbi Yehuda holds that one is liable even for speech alone, not only for actual worship. Accordingly, with regard to what principle do Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda disagree? They disagree with regard to the case of one who incites others to worship him, and the others say to him, yes, we will worship you. One sage, Rabbi Meir, holds that when one incites others to worship him, they are apt to listen to him in the response, yes, that they say to him is sincere. And one sage, Rabbi Yehuda, holds when one incites others to worship him, they are not apt to listen to him, as they say to themselves, in what way is he different from us? The suggestion to worship him is nonsense, and the fact that they say to him, yes, is because they ridicule him. So, and the contradiction between the Mishnayot can be resolved as follows. There, where the Mishnah states that one is liable for speech alone, the reference is to an individual who was incited. Here, where the Mishnah indicates that one is not liable for speech alone, it is referring to a case of an incited multitude of people. The Gemara explains, an individual who was incited does not typically change his mind, and he goes astray after idol worship. Therefore, once he agrees to the suggestion of to worship an idol, he's fully accepted the idol upon himself as a god and is liable. By contrast, a multitude of people were apt to change their minds, and consequently, they do not go astray after idol worship. Rav Yosef said, from where do I say that the halacha that one is liable for merely stating that he will worship an idol was referred to an individual who was incited? As it is written with regard to one who incites people to engage in idol worship, quote, you shall not approve of him nor listen to him, Deuteronomy 13, verse 9, which indicates that if one approved of and listened to the inciter, stating his intention to engage in idol worship, he is liable, even if he does not actually worship an idol. Abaye raised an objection to Rav Yosef's opinion. Is there a difference in halacha between the cases of an incited multitude of people and an individual who was incited? But isn't it taught in a Baraita, with regard to the verse, if your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your neighbor, who is like your own soul, incites you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, Deuteronomy 13, verse 7, that both an individual who was incited and the incited multitude of people are included in this halacha. But the verse singles out the individual from the category of the multitude, and another verse singles out the multitude from the category of the individual. The Torah states separately the halachot of an individual who is incited to engage in idol worship and of an entire city that is subverted to engage in idol worship in order to distinguish between the two cases, as follows. An individual who is incited is singled out from the category of a subverted multitude of people in order to render the punishment to an individual's body more stringent. The individual is executed by stoning, whereas the residents of an idolatrous city are executed by decapitation, and an individual was singled out to render the treatment of the property of an individual who was incited more lenient, as it is not destroyed like that of the residents of an idolatrous city. Additionally, the Torah singles out the subverted multitude of people from the category of an individual who was incited in order to render the punishment given to the bodies of the residents of an idolatrous city, decapitation, so death by sword, more lenient than that given to an individual who was incited, and to render the treatment of their property more stringent, as the city and the property of its residents are burned. Abaye concluded his objection to Rav Yosef's opinion. It can be inferred from the Baraita that only with regard to this matter, the halachot mentioned in the Baraita is the halacha of an individual who was incited different than that of an incited multitude of people, with regard to all other halakhic matters, they are the same. Therefore, a distinction cannot be made between them with regard to the halacha in the case of a verbal commitment to idol worship. Rather, Abaye said that the contradiction between the Mishnayot is to be resolved as follows. Here, where the Mishnah indicates that one is liable only for actual worship, the reference is to one who is incited by himself. That is, one who incited him to idol worship and he made the decision on his own. Whereas there, in the Mishnah, that deems one liable for stating that he will worship an idol, the reference is to one who is incited by others. The reason for the difference is that one who makes the decision on his own is apt to change his mind, whereas one who incited others by others is drawn after them and is unlikely to change his mind. Abaye said, from where do I say that this distinction is correct? As it is written, you shall not approve of him, nor listen to him, Deuteronomy 13, verse 9. Referring to another individual who tried to incite him. And the verse indicates that if one approved of and listened to the inciter, he is liable even for the approval alone. Rava says both this Mishnah and that Mishnah are referring to one incited by others, and they should be differentiated as follows. That Mishnah, which deems one liable for merely expressing approval, is referring to a case where the inciter described the qualities of the idol and said to him, it eats like this, it drinks like this, it does good for its worshippers like this, and it harms those who do not worship it like this. In this case, expressing approval verbally suffices to render one liable, as he was evidently convinced by the description. This Mishnah, which indicates that one is not liable for speech alone, is referring to a case where the inciter did not say to him, it eats like this, it drinks like this, it does good for its worshippers like this, and it harms those who do not worship it like this. Rava said, from where do I say that this distinction is correct? As it is written, let us go and worship other gods, from the gods of the peoples that surround you, the ones near to you, or the ones far from you. Deuteronomy 13, verse 7 and 8. What difference is there to me whether they are near, and what difference is there to me whether they are far? Why would the distance affect the prohibition? Rather, this is what the Torah is saying to you. Do not be tempted to listen to the inciter, as from the nature of the objects of idol worship that are near you, which you recognize to be false, you can derive what the nature is of the ones that are far from you. Therefore, if you are told that there is an idol in a distant land that is real, realize it is a lie. It is from this interpretation that Rava derives his halakhic distinction. What is it not referring to a case where the inciter described to another the qualities of the idol, and he said to him, it eats like this, it drinks like this, it does good for its worshippers like this, and it harms those who do not worship it like this. Conclude from it that only in such a case is the incited person liable for stating his approval. Rav Ashi says that there is a different resolution to the contradiction between the Mishnayot. The latter clause of the Mishnah, 67a, which deems one liable for speech alone, is referring to an apostate Jew. Since he is already an apostate, his stated commitment to idol worship is certainly final. Consequently, he is liable. By contrast, a regular Jew is not liable for speech alone. Ravina says that there is no contradiction. Rather, the Tana teaches the Mishnah employing the style, not only this, but also like that. In other words, the Tana first teaches the elementary halacha that one who worships an idol is liable, and afterward he teaches a more novel halacha that even one who merely says that he will engage in idol worship is immediately liable. It was stated that Amoraim engaged in a dispute concerning the following matter. So, Amoraim are the sages from the Talmud, the Gemara here. In the case of one who worships idols due to his love of another who requested that he bow before the statue, or due to fear of someone coercing him to do so, but not due to faith in that idol, what is the halacha? Abaye says he is liable. Rava says exempt. The Gemara explains, Abaye says he is liable because he worshipped it. Rava says he exempt, as the criteria for becoming liable for idol worship is as follows. If one sincerely accepted the idol upon himself as a god, yes, he is liable, but if he did not accept it sincerely, he is not liable. Abaye attempts to cite several proofs, whose mnemonic is, a slave will bow to the anointed. Eved yish tehave Lamas Shiach. So, and Abaye said, from where do I say that one who worships idols due to love or fear is liable? As we learned in the Mishnah, one who worships idols is executed by stoning. This includes one who worships an idol, and one who slaughters an animal as an idolatrous offering, and one who burns incense as an idolatrous offering. What is added by the Mishnah by stating twice one who worships? Is it not to include the case of one who worships idols due to love or due to fear, in addition to the case of one who worships idols out of faith? Evidently, in this case as well, the worshiper is liable. And Rava could have said to you, in response that the term one who worships should not be understood as Abaye suggests, but rather as Rabbi Yermiah explains, namely that one who worships an idol in its standard manner of worship is liable, and one who sacrifices an idolatrous offering is liable, even if it is not the standard manner of worship of that particular idol. Abaye attempts to cite another proof for his opinion. He said, from where do I say that one who worships idols due to love or fear is liable? As it is taught in a Braita with regard to the verse, you shall not bow to them nor worship them. Exodus 20, verse 5. To them, to idols, you may not bow, but you may bow to a person like yourself. Bowing to a person is merely the acceptance of authority. One might have thought that it is permitted to bow even to a person who is worshipped like a god, like Haman. Therefore, the verse states, nor worship them. That is, any form of pagan worship is prohibited. Abaye concludes, and wasn't Haman worshipped due to fear, and not because the people considered him a god? Evidently, one who engages in idol worship due to fear is liable. And Rava explains this Baraita as follows. One might have thought that it is permitted to bow even to a person like Haman in one regard, but not like Haman in all aspects. It is referring to one like Haman in that Haman himself was an object of idol worship, as he claimed he was a god, and one who worships a person out of belief in his divinity is liable. But the reference is to one who is not like Haman in all respects. As while Haman was worshipped due to fear, and one who engages in idol worship due to fear is not liable, here the reference is to one who worships a person not due to fear, but because he believes in that person's divinity. Abaye therefore said, furthermore said, from where do I say my opinion? As it is taught in a Braita, if an anointed priest, that is the high priest, unwittingly engaged in idol worship, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, he brings an offering for the unwitting act. And the rabbis say a high priest does not bring an offering for an unwitting act of idol worship unless it was due to a lapse of awareness concerning the fundamental halachot of idol worship. That is, he thought that this action was halachically permitted. And they agree that a high priest brings a female goat as his offering to atone for his act of idol worship, as does an ordinary individual, and not a bull, as a high priest brings as a sin offering for other sins. And they agree that a high priest does not bring a provisional guilt offering, which is ordinarily brought by one who is uncertain as to whether he committed a sin that requires him to bring a sin offering. In such a case, he is exempt. Abaye infers, what are the circumstances of the high priest's unwitting act of idol worship that is not due to a lack of awareness of the fundamental halachot of idol worship? If the high priest thought that a certain building was a synagogue and bowed to it, and he then realized that it's a house of idol worship, why should he be obligated to bring an offering, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? Since his heart was directed toward heaven, it is not even an unwitting transgression. Rather, it is a case where the high priest saw the statue of a person and bowed to it. This case must also be clarified. If he accepted that person upon himself as a god, he is an intentional transgressor, and he is liable to receive the death penalty and not to bring an offering. So that's the end of 61.